and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who always scores early. His name is Taylor Rockwell.
Hello, buddy. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. Do you know what that was a reference to?
I'm assuming Sadio Mane scoring for Liverpool against Roma.
Yep, because even though that second leg finished, 4-2 to Roma, and Liverpool technically, mathematically, only won by one goal, I really think that game was over when Sadio Mane scored in the 9th minute.
It was kind of what I expected. I thought it was going to finish 2-1 to Roma. Obviously, that was not the case, but I did expect Liverpool to score early and then maybe everybody to sort of maybe take their foot off the gas a little bit. And I mean everybody in terms of both teams. And I feel like that sort of happened and also sort of didn't happen.
So yeah, here's the misleading thing. Because it finished 4-2, but only because there's that, Nangolan longish range strike in the 86th and then the penalty in the 93rd. Yeah. But it really never felt in danger, to me anyway. Maybe I've got some weird lack of emotion.
I think it probably felt in danger.
Drama resistant.
I think if you're a Liverpool fan, it felt like it was in danger.
True.
Outside of that, I think for most people, it probably had that air of like, yeah, even so. Unless they somehow scored that penalty and got the ball right back down the field. And even then, I think the referee blew the whole time, like almost straight from kickoff.
Roma would have needed some sort of onside kick, which you can't do in soccer because you don't get to take kickoff.
And even then, I don't think it would have. I think unless they were in an attacking position, maybe he gives them a few more seconds.
Virgil van Dijk would have headed it away.
That could be.
Can we talk about, though, why did Roma manage to score 2 goals late in the game? I think I have a tactical answer.
I think it's essentially just that they went more defensive and changed it up a little bit. Yeah, and I think Liverpool's DNA, I think a few other people have speculated about this, that their DNA is so attacking that that's what they're used to doing. They're used to going at people and being very aggressive. And so if you're not doing that anymore, then it kind of changes your fundamental structure.
That's exactly what happened, I think, because they take off. I can't remember which striker they took off towards the end.
They took both off. They took Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino on. They left Mohamed Salah on the field.
Okay, but right at the end, they took off a striker and brought on Klavan, and their 4-3-3 became literally a 5-3-2. They just traded a centre forward for a centre back and thought, we'll ride this out for the last 10 minutes. Yeah. And in that time, they sat off so much that Roma scored 2 goals. Yeah. Even the Nangolan goal, the strike from distance-ish, if you watch that, there's no pressure on him at all because everybody's collapsed into their own box.
Yeah. And so I think that's potentially damning if that's a part of their tactics going forward in the Champions League, which is to say against Real Madrid.
So there's only one more game to go.
Yeah, but if it's them kind of sticking with the game plan, which I'm assuming that they won't have an aggregate lead in the Champions League final, so I can't imagine that will be too big of a factor. Basically, I'm saying I don't think we see Ragnar Klavan, barring injury, in the Champions League final.
You might see him for the last 2 minutes. Yep. We shall see. So I'm not going to get dragged into a Champions League final preview because the reason being that's a thing I'm very excited to talk about because I think this matchup is so great. So many things. Beyond just the Marcelo versus Salah thing, there's a weird tactical thing to talk about. We will do a big preview closer to the date.
You came real close just then.
I know I did. I just dipped my toe in and then pulled it back out. Okay, we've got listener questions to talk about today. Before we get to our listener questions, you teased before we started that you had a thing you wanted to talk about on today's show, and you wouldn't tell me exactly what it was.
Well, it was basically, so I was talking with my neighbor last night about, he was just he's not as familiar with soccer. He understands there's lots of money involved. So we were discussing how much money Man City and Man United have spent on the Neymar transfer and even the broadcast rights. And that led to the discussion of Fox, their bid for the 2018 and 2022 World Cups. And I was just telling him about how they kind of regret that now, spending so much money because the United States didn't qualify. And then in that same conversation, we were discussing how, but because they had to move the 2022 World Cup, at least this is the speculation, that basically the way FIFA kind of dealt with it, with Fox at least, was to say, okay, fine, you can have the 2026 World Cup without any sort of competitive bid.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, so then aren't they still getting basically 3 World Cups for the price of 2? And that was not a thing that I had ever considered. So they're still going to pay money.
They still had to pay for the 2026 World Cup.
They do,
right?
but
they just paid not market rate, I guess.
That's the thing. And also, if 2018 and 2022 were bundled, then you would assume that 2026 and 2030 were meant to be bundled. So now you're not paying for the bundled World Cup. You're getting a standalone World Cup in 2026 where you can then probably bid at whatever you want to bid and FIFA will give it to you. So it was just a weird thing that basically you're paying 2.5 what you'd probably be paying for 3 World Cups, which the United States is only involved in 1. So it feels like there's just a lot of coverage of Like that, like Fox is regretting it and blowing this, and they spent so much money. And I kind of had this realization of like, no, this is kind of they're coming out on top.
They're still going to make money on the World Cup. I think the all the headlines you saw previous to this were essentially because of the stories that came out about them only sending one commentary team to Russia, and a lot of the commentary teams for Fox will be doing it sort of here in the United States off of monitors in the studios.
Yes, but I think it's all being billed as because the United States didn't qualify, they want to cut costs back. They're rolling back some of the plans they had, and it's all because the United States isn't there. And so isn't this so ridiculous that Fox spent so much money and now they're not committing any money to the tournament?
I see.
Whereas I have a feeling that they're basically like, no, we're going to commit it to the other two we have when the United States is hopefully theoretically there.
Oh, I have even a different take. I don't think they've undercommitted all that much anyway, because it's not as if so John Strong and Stu Holden are going as the commentary team that will be on the ground, right? And they'll give the best commentary because Stu Holden, I really think, is one of the best in the world at his job. He is so good. But they're also sending the entire studio team, right? It's like Rob Stone, Alexi Lalas, all those guys. They're going to be in Russia. So it's not as if they've and they're going to build a set in Red Square.
I mean, they're not
right?
sending their commentary teams to do it live.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing aside from the two.
But they're still building a set in Moscow and sending everybody else. And do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not as if they're completely just sending John Strong and everybody else stays home.
No. I mean,
right?
but I think that's like part of what I'm saying. But I think the larger thing that I'm getting at is that it seems like a lot of the coverage I've seen is like, it's this debacle. It's Fox are like in the horror show because the U.S. didn't qualify. And now they're like, oh, they're not getting any money for this tournament that they spent so much money on. And I guess my feeling is like, that's the easy narrative to take. But in reality, they're getting this third World Cup for below market value.
Oh, man, I was ready for a much more blockbuster idea.
So then you're with me, though, that they basically are getting 3 World Cups for probably the price of 2.5 World Cups.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And so it all bounces out in the end. And this is the thing, I almost tweeted this last night, and then I was like, maybe I'm missing something, but also, I didn't want to tweet this and have people take it the wrong way, but I feel like for Fox, a World Cup without the United States is sort of a half a World Cup in terms of the U.S. broadcast, the viewership they're going to get.
A practice World Cup.
And so in the end, they're basically getting 2.5 World Cups for the price of 2.5 World Cups. So I think maybe some of the reporting where it's kind of like, oh, it's this huge financial disaster for Fox, I think that's a little overblown.
The one thing I would say, though, is even though I've just said that they are sending most of the crew still to Russia, I would say just spend the extra bit of money to send 2 more commentary crews.
Yeah.
Because you and I have called games live. We've done Richmond Kickers games live at the field, a lot of them, and we've done 2 or 3 off the monitor. It is a different experience.
I mean, I would say, I don't know if this is a hot take or a bold take. Why do you need a studio crew there? Like, that's what I would say. Is like if you have people calling it, I mean, for the Champions League, it's not like Alexi Lalas and Rob Stone are in Rome or in Liverpool. So I would say send the commentary teams who are dependent upon being able to see everything and keep Rob Stone and Alexi Lalas in LA.
Are those plane tickets transferable?
You never know.
All right, to the listener questions?
Yes.
Okay, we have, I think, 5 listener questions today. First one we're going to answer comes from Carlos Garcia. Carlos says, hey guys, so I was made aware that the Champions League final will be played during the time of Ramadan. As you guys know, Mohamed Salah is Muslim and will surely take part in the rituals. Do you guys believe this could have an effect on his fitness? Has it affected him in previous years? So before we answer this, we should explain maybe what the rituals are.
Yes, it's essentially one of the 5 pillars of Islam is you have to fast during the holy month of Ramadan, which many players choose to do. There's a few, I think Mesut Ozil maybe chose not to observe during the World Cup, I think it might have been. But it's essentially, you have to fast. One of the pillars is fasting, which means no food, but also no water. Nothing can enter the body from when sunrise begins until when the sun sets.
So it's a good chunk of the day.
It sure is.
Ramadan is... in effect, I guess, is the word, during the Champions League final, which I checked.
I think it ends the day the World Cup starts. So there is that. Yeah.
So I think this may be...
the day before, yeah.
This may be a thing we'll talk about with the Egypt World Cup team in the future, but specifically for the Champions League, the game is in Kiev. The sun comes up in Kiev at 3:25 a.m. Sun goes down at 8:33 p.m. So Mohamed Salah will not be able to break fast, which again includes water, until an hour and about 15 minutes before kickoff, because it kicks off at 9:45 p.m. Eastern European time.
I'm going to say theoretically to what you just said, but sure.
Why do you say theoretically?
Because there is dispensation. There basically are reasons for which people do not have to observe the fast or are permitted not to observe. That would be like if you're elderly or infirmed, but another one would be travelers. If you are traveling, I think it's very, this is where, I don't want to offend anybody, religious texts can be difficult, but it's...
And also different people adhere to things to different degrees, right?
Yes, but it's essentially that I think if you're traveling past a certain distance for a less than or fewer than a certain number of days, it's like it's either 3 or 5 days, then it's seen as like, oh, this is like a temporary situation that can't be avoided, that could cause problems, therefore it is kind of permitted, you have to make it up after the fact.
So it's within the bounds of reason that Mohamed Salah could essentially get an exemption of sorts for the Champions League final, specifically because of the travel.
Yes. Yeah? And then I think there's and then could make it up after the fact. There are other people who'd argue
make it up after the fact.
Like basically, like he can observe those 3 days that he doesn't fast later on if it's approved. I think also there are other people who would argue that you can, I forget what the rules are there, but like you can feed other people basically, and that can make up for not fasting. Again, if you have dispensation, if I would assume an imam or someone has approved of your decision.
Got it. Okay. So let's think of this the other way then. What if Mohamed Salah does 100% observe the fast? I honestly, I don't know how devout he is, how committed he is to making sure he does this by the book, but let's assume that he does.
Plenty of people do. I mean,
plenty of people do, right? So if he fasts from 3 a.m. till 8:30 p.m., an hour and a bit before kickoff, I weirdly, in some ways, I don't think it's as big a deal as some people will be ready to make out.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a safe take because if you're used to just being able to eat whatever you want whenever you want, maybe it seems like, oh, suddenly like my life is thrown into chaos. But if you are
like if it was us tomorrow and someone said you've got to fast during daylight
and then play
and we had a game at
and
night,
then play the Champions League final,
it would be a big deal. I mean, not just because we're not qualified to play in the Champions League final. But if we had to play an indoor game here, for example, it would be tough for us because we've never done it before. I had a blood test once and I fasted, but it's not quite the same. Mohamed Salah has done this his whole life, right? It's not that new to him.
We assume.
He's very capable of. Well, he's done it before. Put it that way. Yeah.
And but then on top of that, he is a very wealthy athlete. So with that comes nutritionists and dietitians and cooks and chefs and what have you. So there are people who will be set up to like allow this to be relatively seamless. And then I've also read some stuff from different nutritionists who basically say that actually, if you're looking at like when you break the fast, it can be advantageous because you can be like rehydrating and fueling in the ideal hours before a match.
Okay. There's also the idea that Mohamed Salah, did you read the Alberto Moreno quote?
No.
He basically said Salah's training at like 20% of maximum anyway because he's concerned about getting injured. We're so late in the season. Mohamed Salah is at sort of fitness, right? It's not like he's got to do sort of 2 a days to get ready for the Champions League final. The key is just maintaining maintaining a non-injured state is the key towards the end of the season.
I would say the one thing that would be interesting though is it is not just like no food and no, flavored beverages. It's no water as well. And there's no get-arounds. It is basically, I think the way it's actually written is like you cannot introduce anything into your body, which means you can't have an IV or anything like that. So I think that is the only issue that I could see is how he deals with hydration and like potassium.
So, to the second part of Carlos's question, which was, has it affected him in previous years? So I went back and looked. So one thing to note is Ramadan moves, right? It's not set dates every year. It's with a lunar calendar, I believe. In the last few years, the last 3 years, I believe, it's basically been during the World Cup type of time, right? Like June-ish. Mohamed Salah's been off. That was his time off. So he got Ramadan in his time off for the last few years because Egypt did not go to the World Cup, for one thing. And the Africa Cup of Nations has been in not a summer tournament, right? Before that, there was a time when Ramadan in 2014 was like July stretching into August. And I found a story about Mohamed Salah being affected in pre-season training. Because he was saying in pre-season, you do 2 sessions a day. By the second session with no water, I was struggling. So that did affect him. But I think that's, like I said earlier, it's very different, right? Because that's the beginning of the season and the intense fitness you have to do to try and get in shape versus the end of the season where it's just maintaining.
I agree. My final thing I'll say about this, though, is like, without going too in-depth and without, like, naming names or anything, I would say this feels like the type of story that you will read about in relation to major tournaments when there is, like, sort of a conflict. But maybe people don't realize how many Muslim players there are, that a lot of very famous soccer players and many other sports, but in this case, soccer players are Muslim and do fast, and it's just sort of not covered, I think, until there is this one big name player.
Yeah,
but far more people than you might think.
When he's maybe the exception on a Liverpool team.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I can't imagine Jordan Henderson is really worrying about Ramadan.
More questions to come. But first, today's show is sponsored by our friends. I could call them friends, right? We've known them a long time now. At Roughneck Scarves. Roughneck Scarves are the official providers of scarves for US Soccer, Major League Soccer, the United Soccer Leagues, gave them their full name, and the NCAA.
Is it plural?
United Soccer Leagues. I'm going to say yes. I could be wrong.
I think you might be wrong, but I think you were not wrong to ask the question you asked on Twitter. You asked, if you were to design a custom Roughneck scarf to represent this week in the Champions League, what would it look like? We got many good responses.
We did.
Daryl has curated them.
I have curated them. These are curated responses. First response is from Marcus Nuno. Marcus says, one side Marcelo and Trent, so Marcelo and Trent Alexander-Arnold, playing goalie for their teams. The other side, me not crying while writing a letter to UEFA asking for VAR. So we didn't
It took me a minute. I was like, did they do that?
We didn't talk earlier about Trent Alexander-Arnold's handball. It was definitely handball, right? Yeah. VAR would have caught that.
I mean, there were reasons for Roma fans to feel aggrieved. There was that. There was the shove, contact, what have you.
Virgil van Dijk?
Yeah.
For the Wijnaldum goal? I don't think so.
I think so
he just jumps up in the air and bumps into Dzeko, but...
Yeah, I think I did enjoy when Fox tried to break that one down. They weren't quite sure. They were like, and look at this. Like, they didn't really know what to say of it.
Here's a soccer thing.
Yeah. Earning those dollars.
You got any other responses for us, Taylor?
I do. From, so we're using our made-up names. I get that one. Which is at Yogi M. Cloven, is what I'm going to say there.
I'm going to say Yogi McCloven.
That's better.
Yeah.
Yogi, you're so smart with this.
Well, I can tell this person watches a lot of movies.
That's a good point. A picture of Mo Salah dressed as Chuck Norris, and on the side saying, Mo Salah has two speeds, walk or goal.
All right. Is that a thing they say about Chuck Norris?
I don't
Let's
know.
say yes. I'm going to assume that's yes. Well, I'm going to guess this person also watches a lot of Chuck Norris movies.
Behind his facial hair, Mo Salah does have a fist. That is true.
Soccer Never Sleeps says his scarf would be Ulrich sitting alone on one side. That's the sad side. And Raja Nangalan making a bad back pass on the other. Oh, no, they're both sad sides.
Yep, they're both sad sides. Man, it's insane to me that Raja in a 4-2 win over Liverpool with Raja Nangalan scoring 2, he is still going to be the one who sort of gets a lot of blame for this result.
Should we talk? We didn't really talk about this, right? So for the opening goal, the Sadio Mane goal, it all comes from a stray Raja Nangalan pass.
Yep.
He is sort of at midfield. He's forced backwards, tries to play a square ball, we believe, to Manolas, and I think just mishits it.
Yep. I think so. I think
as simple as that, isn't it?
And we think that especially because when Roma do score off of James Milner's face, he's James in that situation. It starts with a really good Raja Nangalan ball, kind of over the top. It's
ball.
Like chipped crossfield ball. Thank you. Yeah. And I think that's maybe not the chipped part, but that's what he's looking for with that pass. Is like a kind of put a little English on it, spin it into Manolas. Manolas swings it around, and Roma are good to go. Just mishit in this situation.
A little Belgian on it. I think.
Final one comes from Eric Freeman. Just use the same scarf from last year and the year before that. Hashtag Real Madrid.
Yeah. I think Eric might be getting ahead of himself here. He's essentially predicting a Real Madrid victory in the final.
We shall see.
We shall see. Again, we're not previewing just
We're not. But we are telling you that if you wanted to get a Roughneck scarf and you wanted to get 20% off that Roughneck scarf, you could use the promo code Total Soccer Show, all one word, all uppercase.
Does it have to be uppercase?
I think so.
All right, we'll try it. Do uppercase just to be safe. At roughneckscarves.com for 20% off. Thank you, Roughneck Scarves, for sponsoring today's show.
Indeed. Now, back to listener questions. One from Billy Harding, who asks, are fullbacks the most undervalued position in football?
My instinctive knee-jerk reaction was yes.
Yep.
And then I thought about it a bit more, and it's kind of no, I think.
I agree with everything that you've just said verbatim.
All right, so why was your knee-jerk reaction yes, as was mine?
I'm going to go back to the thing I've suddenly started referencing a lot is the Chuck Klosterman overrated, underrated, properly rated idea. And I think that fullbacks did used to be very underrated in that they, you look at Marcelo, you look even when Luke Shaw got injured for Man United, and it became this whole, he was critical to our attack. And it's what?
I would look at the Real Madrid-Bayern Munich game over 2 legs. Goals from Marcelo and Kimmich and Kimmich.
Yeah, I mean,
left backs and right backs
it's a decent shout.
And all the trouble at right back for Real Madrid with Vasquez playing there in place of Carvajal. Yeah,
but I think because of all those things, like it has become, I think, a more properly rated. Like, no, it's just fundamentally very important. And so for me, I think if you were going to think about the most undervalued position in football, strangely for me, it's holding midfield. That is the one. There we go. We spent too much time together.
We have not colluded on this, right?
We haven't, no. If someone really? Do you have holding midfielder?
If someone investigates us, we can say there's no collusion.
All right.
Yeah, holding midfielder, because I think holding midfielders are the key.
I can't believe we have the same answer.
They're the key to so many teams, right?
Yep.
Like Busquets, you could argue, is the most important Barcelona player, and yet it was Neymar that was worth 200 million or whatever, and Barcelona paid 100 million for Dembele. And honestly, I've mostly done this according to transfer fees. So to backtrack a little bit, am I stepping on your point here?
Oh no, I didn't even think about. I took undervalued from like a metaphorical. I didn't think about monetarily. That's interesting.
I went dollar bills.
Okay.
Yeah, euro bills.
All right.
So the way I looked at it was, my initial answer was, maybe they're properly rated now because Manchester City paid £50 million for Kyle Walker and Benjamin Mendy this past summer, right? So you think, maybe these teams recognise the importance of fullbacks. But then you think of that in the global scale of soccer transfers. That's just inflation for fullbacks, right? That's just inflation for fullbacks because, again, Neymar was 200 million or whatever. So they are undervalued.
Yep.
But I think I would say defensive midfielders, to your point, are more important, and therefore they should be fetching the same price as Neymar and should be fetching more than fullbacks. But they're not, because I don't think there's a £50 million defensive midfielder.
Or if
maybe Gundogan,
or if there aren't many. I forget how much he went for. I think he was closer to 40. But either way, I think, speaking of Man City, I think part of the reason why fullbacks will become properly valued is because I think they're going to buy a couple more, and then they're going to spend some money. I think they are. And I think Man United will buy one or two more as well. So yeah, I think then you're going to see
fullback arms race this summer.
You're going to see that value increase from a non-monetary standpoint. And then I'll go back to monetary because I think I have an answer for that one too. I think it's because a very good number 6, a very good holding midfielder makes it look so easy that you'll just be like, and when they make a mistake, it's so high profile that you might be like, this guy's terrible.
Like Nainggolan?
Yeah, or like another ball gentleman who maybe some people don't like. Like, I think there are those moments when people think, this guy isn't as good or he's not as important. And
it's because he's the most important.
Yeah, that's the thing, is holding midfielder so often, going back to your one with Busquets, there was always like all the stories about how he never takes more than 2 touches. Like, it's always very simple, but that's part of what allowed Barcelona to be that Barcelona.
What's the quote is, and I don't know who it should be attributed to. If you watch the game, you don't see Busquets, but if you watch Busquets, you see the whole game.
There we go. That's a great quote, and I don't know where it came from, but I like it. So I think that is one where it's easy to overlook just how important that is, even if you recognize, like, of course, a number 6 is important. I think you still might be undervaluing it financially. Go ahead. I
was going to say non-financially.
Okay, yeah, that's why I was silent.
I think holding midfielders are the most undervalued because of the things like that Busquets quote, where they're so influential on the game, but they don't do a sort of noticeable thing like a Marcelo or Benjamin Mendy overlap and cross. Like, anyone just casually watching a game can notice that, but not everybody casually watching a game can notice a holding midfielder pulling the strings and influencing the whole game.
Yeah.
Jordan Henderson is another good example. Brilliant for Liverpool this season. Does not get the same praise as Salah or Mane or Firmino or even Robertson.
You got to do something noteworthy, and I would say the more noteworthy a number 6 is, somehow the worse they might be, because I think like the really noteworthy ones are the ones who are like, that's a leg breaker number 6. Like, you get those moments, or like a free kick number 6, but I don't know if that helps you as much. Financially, though, I was going to say, if you're going undervalued position, strangely, I think it might be goalkeeper, because I think about. I do not know off the top of my head what the record spent on a goalkeeper is, but it's not as much as you would think. Because I remember with the De Gea saga that there were reports that it was going to be like 60 million, and everybody was like, whoa, I can't believe they're going to spend that much on a goalkeeper. But this was at a time when United had already bought Paul Pogba, or like we're about to, for that amount of money, or for 1.5 times that, whatever. So I think that's one where maybe I don't necessarily know why, because that seems like one where if you can get one of those 1 or 2 best goalkeepers in the world, it really does matter. But they don't necessarily seem to correlate with a massive transfer figure.
All right, it's my turn to blow your mind
now.
The reason players like Paul Pogba and Neymar are literally fetch a higher transfer price is I think they have more marketing value than a really good fullback like Kyle Walker or Benjamin Mendy or a good goalkeeper like David De Gea. Like, it's not as easy to put David De Gea in a commercial and to sort of do all the merchandising stuff with him as it is with, say, Paul Pogba, because he's got sort of more of an aura about him, because he'll do those, I was going to say step overs, but he doesn't, right? He does more rollovers. Yeah. Like, he'll do the more impressive stuff, and that moves units.
And to your point, I would say that if it's Paul Pogba doing an ad, like Paul Pogba's Adidas, I apologize if people hate Man United. I know I keep going back to it, but like his United unveiling with Adidas was him just dancing while Stormzy raps. De Gea in an ad, it's going to be him like, get out of here, germs, buy this disinfectant. Like, it's always going to be a goalkeeper saving something or blocking something. Like, it's always going to be dependent upon the position.
He should have his own line called De Gea Way.
I bet there are goalkeepers who do have that sort of like for ultimate stopping power when it comes to stains. Like that's, so I think that is where you'll get goalkeeper marketing. Outside of that, you're not going to have David De Gea like wearing flashy clothes and dancing in the background of a rap video.
Brilliant. Okay, next question.
Cue the tweet where somebody sends us a video of David De Gea dancing in a rap video.
Please do. Please do. Tall people dancing is funny. Ira Jersey is with the next question. Ira wants to know, is there an optimal, that's in quotation marks by the way, time to make substitutions excluding injuries? I noticed some managers substitute in the 60th, 65th and 70th minutes like clockwork. Others seem to do so haphazardly, while some seem to wait to bring in subs starting later. Is there any evidence or studies showing one method is better than the other? And I emphasised the word studies because I think we both found a study. We talked about
this one. We know that we're on the same page. Yeah, the one that I saw a few different people reference. So then I just went and read the abstract. I was not going to claim to have read the whole thing. But Brett Myers, former professional footballer, or at least when this study came out.
Is he a former professional footballer? Because I
kept seeing that, and I didn't see. I feel like he maybe played USL or something. But professor in the Department of Management and Operations in the Villanova School of Business. There we go. That's all his titles.
And has briefly worked as an analytics consultant for Toronto FC.
There we go. Get it all in there. So over a total of 1,800 professional games, he observed substitution patterns, determined that heading into the second half, if your team is losing, subs must be made before the 58th minute. The first substitution has to occur before the 58th minute. He determined that the best pattern or the most likely to reverse odds if you're losing were 58th minute, 73rd minute, 79th minute.
He called it the decision rule, to sub before the 58th. If you're still losing, sub before the 73rd. If you're still losing, sub before the 79th. And when teams did that in the 1,800 games he saw, teams that followed the decision rule improved their goal differential 42.27% of the time. Teams that did not follow the decision rule of 58, 73, 79 only improved their goal differential by 20.52% of the time.
So you basically have a 1 in 5 chance if you don't do that versus a 50-50 chance, more or less.
Is that right?
I mean, 42 rounded up to 50, sure, versus 20%, yeah. Basically, you have a double the chance of pulling it back. Put it that way.
There we go. That's a better way of saying it. Yeah. I do not believe this study, though.
I do and I don't, is how I'm going to phrase that. Yeah, I mean, I think because I really don't like it when managers sub in the 55th to 60th minutes. Maybe the 60th is okay, but I hate those 55. Because to me, I guess I get the idea that it means that you've gone in at halftime, you have said, like, okay, here was our game plan. You were supposed to stay wide, but you're coming inside. So I really want you to work on staying wide. You were supposed to stay inside, but you're going wide. Focus on staying inside. And you can give them those 10 minutes to start the second half to see if the players respond. If they don't, then you can take them off and put somebody else on.
So what, you say you don't like that?
But I feel like if a player...
That sounds like a good sort of chance to implement the new instructions. If you fail, then 10 minutes is the time, 55 is the time when you say... out.
But I just feel like so often you see that and you see the players doing the same thing. I feel like more often than not, you don't see.
That's why they get subbed out.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Is like it just feels to me like if you're going to do that at halftime. I mean, look at what Zidane did over these two legs. Like he wasn't afraid to make those changes if those changes needed to be made. So I think that's where I have some issue with it, but I know you have more of an issue with the idea of statistics being used to determine results.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a fan of statistics in soccer, but not when there's so much context missing, right? So essentially, what Brett Myers has done is taken all this data and looked at when games turned around and here's when the substitutions happened. Those goals could have come for all kinds of reasons, right? It could have been... One could have been a defender tripped over and scored an own goal, right? There could be any kind of reasons. And just because those goals coincide with the 58th, 73rd and 79th minute substitutions, it doesn't mean that the substitution was the cause of it. I think he's sort of... It's weird for me to say to a data scientist, but I think he's confusing, what's the word? Causation...
I never understand this one, but yeah.
Correlation does not always imply causation.
Okay.
Right? The substitutions did not cause those goals.
But sometimes it does, Daryl.
But sometimes it does, but I'm not taking this as sort of gospel proof that it does.
I think the difference here, and maybe this is involved...
Come at me, math nerds.
Again, we only read the abstract, to be fair.
Yeah.
But I would say I'm with you in the sense that like merely making a substitution does not itself fix a problem. I think the fundamental idea would be that a manager making that change has identified a vulnerability or a problem or an opportunity. They might have swatted this one, to use the Silicon Valley verbiage. Basically, they might have identified, this is what needs to change. And they might have practiced this. They might have approached this in training of, if they're doing this, then we're going to do this. That change is going to happen here. It's not necessarily the change that brings about the response. It is everything going into making that change.
There you go. I'm going to say what you said, I think, in a slightly different way, which is the minute doesn't matter. What you change matters. Right? If you're fixing problems, then you're fixing problems and improving your team. And it doesn't to me, it doesn't matter if that comes in the 58th or the 65th necessarily. Okay. If you identify a problem and fix it, that has to have more effect than the minute at which you substitute.
The only thing I would disagree with there is that I do think minute matters in terms of if you're getting into the 82nd minute when you're like, you know what? That still isn't working from the thing at halftime. That's where I would say that then when you make that change matters. If something obviously isn't working, if you are being completely overwhelmed and you fail to make a change, then I think it really matters if you wait until the 75th minute or the 80th minute to correct a very obvious issue.
So what we would say then is, and this is all kind of just observation and gut instinct kind of thing, is that roughly between the 55th and the 75th minute is when you should make changes if you're chasing a game. That's what I feel. Because you can get those 10 minutes to give the players a chance with the new instructions. And then from then on, up to the 75th minute, there's still enough game to play for your new sub to take in effect. Any later than that, and there's kind of not enough time to necessarily see results. The one that I think of is Euro 2016, England trailing Iceland. I've got this memory, it may be wrong, of Roy Hodgson waiting forever to bring Marcus Rashford on. And I think he comes on with 10 minutes or fewer remaining, and he just sort of goes at Icelandic players, dribbling in a way. He always does, right? It's very much a sort of, I'm going to dribble directly at you and something might happen player. And it just felt kind of exciting for those few minutes. And we could have had 20 minutes of that and England might have equalised. But instead we only got a few minutes of that, and they did not.
So
earlier is better.
I would say that's true, except that, again, if Marcus Rashford comes on 10 minutes earlier, but still isn't given specific assignments other than, like, go try stuff, I don't know if he does go try stuff and maybe gets a goal, I still don't know necessarily if I credit the time of the substitution as opposed to a moment of individual brilliance, because if a manager isn't giving specific instructions to execute a specific game plan, then I don't know what matters.
I want to move us on.
But I love Roy Hodgson.
I want to move us on and say I'm a fan of the halftime sub.
Me too.
I'm a big fan of the halftime sub because I think that really is when you can make a change and you've got like 10, 15 minutes to explain to your players what the change is and what's going to happen. And then you get a whole half of soccer for the guy coming in.
Yeah. And I think then it just becomes about how good you are with the media. Because obviously if I'm subbed off at halftime by Coach Daryl, the immediate question is going to be like, is everything okay? Are you guys feuding? Is this a problem? If Jose Mourinho takes off Paul Pogba, to go back to the name we keep going to, like he's one that then it's all going to be that media speculation. So then you just got to be good at saying, like, no, I didn't set him up to win. I took him out, put in somebody who was like, I could spend 15 minutes telling them what to do.
There you go. Or how about this? If something's obviously not working, change it in the first half.
Yeah.
Change it in the first half.
Yes.
I've seen that. I've had that done to me by a high school coach, and it worked.
Yeah. And I think that is a thing that you have to do. And I would say people might then ask, well, why not spend the 15 minutes at halftime telling Daryl Grove subs Taylor Rockwell off? Why not just tell Taylor Rockwell at halftime to my phone?
Turn your phone off.
Yeah. Why not just tell Taylor at halftime, here's all the things you need to do. But if you've been telling me throughout the week, you got to press, you got to be press and be aggressive, and you got to step and you got to win that ball high. But then suddenly at halftime we're making these adjustments where we're going to sit back and look to counter. it's easier. It's the same thing as like training somebody from scratch versus training somebody who already has experience. They might have the player might have this mindset about like, I got to go attack, even if they're trying to sit back. You still might just have those moments where they run forward when they shouldn't, whereas a fresh player might be coming in with those fresh instructions more readily in their mind.
So to answer Ira's question succinctly, yes, there are studies, but I'm not buying them.
That's fair. I'm not,
which feels very arrogant, but I'm really not convinced.
I would say it's another one of those reasons why we enjoy listener questions, because I genuinely do not like it when I see a sub in the 55th minute. I think it means that the manager didn't have the guts to make a change at halftime and maybe waited a little bit just to see maybe it'll be better. But thinking about it more, I do have a little bit more understanding of like why you would wait 10 minutes to see if the player is capable of executing those changes.
Okay.
So I appreciate that question, but I think I'm with you that, statistics aren't always that great.
Taylor at TotalSoccerShow.com.
That's fine, man.
2 more questions to come, but today's show is also sponsored by Away Days Football. Away Days Football is an independent soccer clothing brand out of Boston.
You are correct, my friend.
I certainly am.
They have lovely apparel with their logo on it, which you always like to reference. I think because you weren't sure what it was.
It's because I got it wrong the first time. I thought it was 2 different soccer balls, but it's actually a soccer ball and the globe, sort of slightly overlaid. Looks good.
But the one that we especially enjoy is the mystery kit option, where you you basically just get a club from around the world. You never know who it's going to be. It could be from South America, North America, Europe, wherever. And then you can support that club or not. Just add to your collection.
The only sort of guarantee is that it won't be a big team, right? So it's not going to be Manchester City. So if you're a Manchester United fan, don't be worrying that you're going to get a Manchester City or Liverpool jersey. That's not going to happen. Unless you have some like strong feelings about the Finnish second division and there's a team you don't want, but not many people. I don't imagine many people listen to
Segunda division in Spain, I think. Yeah.
So we got one tweet recently. Someone signed up for the mystery kit and received Real Oviedo, which I believe is Sid Lowe of Guardian Football Weekly fame. Sid Lowe's team, Real Oviedo.
They might be Segunda B. There's a chance.
They've been slipping and slipping.
There's a chance.
Mystery kits are $25. There's also the kids mystery kit. So the same concept, but in kids sizes, tiny sizes.
Tiny sizes, indeed. So if people wanted to check out the away days, what could they do, Daryl?
Well, what they should do is not pay full price.
Okay.
Right? Even though the $25 is a bargain, you can still not pay full price by using the discount code TSS at awaydaysfootball.com.
All capital letters.
You'll get 15% off. 15% off with TSS at awaydaysfootball.com. The link is in the show notes. Treat yourself.
Thank you to Away Days for sponsoring today's episode.
Treat your kids.
Treat your kids. Next question comes from Shane Carlson, who says, I was listening to the Top Drawer Soccer Show episode about homegrown players.
Represent.
And in it, Daryl stated that before homegrown players existed, MLS teams had no mechanism to sign the players that they had invested in other than attempting to pick them up in the draft.
Okay, so can we just clarify that then?
Sure.
We were talking about the homegrown player rule, which is that's how MLS teams do sign the players that come to their academy. They have to designate them homegrown, then they can sign them instead of losing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this got Shane wondering, how do European clubs handle their academies? Obviously, they already have established pipelines that have been proven to work for signing young talent. So why didn't MLS just adopt the same system? What do European clubs do to keep other clubs from poaching their academy talent?
Okay, can we take this a question at a time then?
Sure.
How do European clubs handle their academies? Here's the basic thing is
they have them.
They have them.
Yeah.
They train the kids up, and then at some point they offer them a professional contract, and then they sign the contract, and then you are a professional player with Leicester City or whomever you've signed the contract with.
Now, here's my question for you, because I've met a few different people from around England, and they'll always say, oh, yeah, I was with the Watford Academy or the QPR Academy, and that always sounds amazing to me. But is it the case that it's sort of like they want to catch as many as possible, so lots of people start off in the QPR or Watford or what have you academies?
I mean, it's not lots of people. I mean, these are very talented players who start off in those academies, but it gets funneled and funneled and funneled, and you sort of get let go and let go and let go. So it really is almost like a pop idol, American Idol type thing, where only the very best make it through to the next round and eventually sign a professional contract.
Right.
Much more get let go along the way. There's a lot of crying kids in offices, and I've heard from academy staff and coaches that this is just the worst part of their job. That they have to tell kids, "I'm sorry, you're not going to make it. At least not with us."
Yep.
I've got an answer to the question: why don't MLS teams just adopt the same system? And the answer is single entity.
Yeah,
The answer is single entity.
I would say they kind of did, though. I mean, it is the case that it is still MLS teams have academies where they have kids from that specific area, and specific areas are because England has the rule where you can't go out and recruit kids from a certain distance away within England, right, or within the UK
at certain ages, though. Right? Yeah. Once you get to like 16, you can start moving around a bit.
So that does sound somewhat familiar to like catchment areas, development academy teams, that sort of thing.
All right, but I think you're getting too much in the weeds here. I think the difference is the reason that MLS teams couldn't just straight up say, "Hey, you're in our academy, we'll sign you to a professional contract." Is because it's single entity and every contract has to go through Major League Soccer first. That's why there has to be this weird homegrown player mechanism, is because MLS clubs are not individual entities in the way that Leicester City is an individual entity and Queen's Park Rangers is a separate individual entity.
There we go.
Yeah.
So that leaves the final question. What do European clubs do to keep other clubs from poaching their academy talent?
Cross their fingers real tight.
Pretty much.
So, I mean, you sort of can poach young players by getting them to come and play with your youth team. But what you do get is training compensation. So when a player does sign a professional contract, all the teams that have contributed to their training over the years get a percentage, get money, are entitled to money going forward.
Yep.
And the fee is based on how many years you spent practicing with that team, essentially, or training and being developed by that team.
Between the ages of like 12 and 16 or 12 and 15, I think it is.
I think it was 21.
Okay, maybe that's it too, but maybe I think those are like the larger areas.
Okay, if you say so. But yeah, essentially it's the more time you spend with a team in your development, that team is entitled to money when you move on. Fair enough?
Yep. There we go. Is that it?
I think so. Right?
I think the issue though is just that you do have those very notable exceptions when a larger club will come in and suddenly it's why you have Dutch teenagers playing in the Man United Academy. It's because you can go out and sort of look at other clubs' academies, and I think as long as they haven't signed a professional contract, you can attempt to entice them, and then you get into the issues of how do you clear it with FIFA and with the laws regarding like children moving countries to play for teams at a young age. You get all those issues, but maybe that's a conversation for another day.
That is a conversation for another day.
Okay.
Final conversation for today is Rich Ronkal's question. So I'm not paired happily again. Rich Roncal wants to know, what happened to the sweeper and stopper combo in defences, specifically on the professional level? Do they still use it in the guise of the two centre-backs, or is it not that practical on the professional level?
The last one.
All right, so for anyone not familiar, what is the stopper-sweeper system?
I mean, it's essentially, if you think of like a midfield diamond, just make that your defense. So it's like it's basically sweeper, your deepest player, stopper ahead of them, and then the two fullbacks. So you've got your defensive diamond.
Okay. I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I'm not sure this was ever used aggressively at a professional level.
Okay.
Right? There have been sweepers, but to me they've normally been in back threes where they've got more protection in front of them. And there have been liberos like, say, Franz Beckenbauer. For this question, I went back, I watched some 1974 World Cup, West Germany, Franz Beckenbauer in his libero role. He's not really like a deep sweeper. He's more just sort of doesn't have to do much man marking and is free to sort of push forward or sort of do whatever he thinks is best, basically because everybody trusts him to make the right decision all the time. But that diamond shape you talk about, I don't think ever really happened in a big way at the professional level. I think it happens in American high schools.
So here's the thing. Daryl and I had a little bit of a conversation about this before we started recording, View Behind the Curtain, and I wanted to disagree with you on that professional level, and I think there are examples of famous sweepers. But I think you're right. When I think about the times I've seen a sweeper used with a stopper ahead of them, it is usually in American soccer, American high school soccer, youth soccer, or pop culture. Like, I remember, this will not resonate for you, but like Matt Christopher was this writer who wrote all these books that we would read in elementary school, and it was always like this thick, wide set print, but it was always, I forget what the titles always were, but it was always like a 12-year-old who was trying to make the football team or a 12-year-old who wanted to score goals in soccer. And I remember that being like very rigid. If you're a fullback, you cannot go forward. It means you're a fullback, you're always back. But a stopper can roam around a little bit more. And I think it is an American construct, and I think construct is the right term because it points to like the rigidity of the system that I think a lot of people grew up playing.
And it seems to me that maybe some lesser talented coaches were just sort of like, okay, here's how we do the defense. There's the stopper, you go and tackle and do whatever you want. And there's the sweeper, you sit deep behind the defence and clear things up.
Yep.
Once you get to a reasonably high level, not all the way up to professional, just like even a decent high school level, that system is going to get absolutely murdered.
Then let's talk about why, because I think there are a variety of reasons why it probably isn't as widely used as maybe Rich or other folks might expect.
I mean, the obvious one is offside, right?
Exactly.
If you've got a sweeper sitting deep, you are inviting a Luis Suarez type predator to just be farther and farther up on the last man, and in a total one-on-one situation, you cannot play an offside trap with a rigid stopper sweeper system.
And I would add to that, not even necessarily up on that last defender, but Luis Suarez, to your point, is going to be the player who goes wide and stands 10 yards behind the fullback, but the sweeper's still keeping him on side. So now the fullback either has to drop in or the sweeper has to cheat over, and one player can suddenly drastically alter the defensive tactics. I would say two other big things for me, aside from the offside line, is basically that it's what a holding midfielder does. It's just they move the sweeper to in front of the back four, is what I would argue. So now you have the holding midfielder who does all of the stuff that a sweeper used to do, winning the ball, dropping in if need be, like being that kind of deep-lying playmaker at times, helping possess the ball. All of those things, I think, help with the sweeper in front, which is where the holding midfielder would be. And then the last thing would be Manuel Neuer, the evolution of a sweeper keeper. If you've got a keeper really willing to come off his or her line to win the ball 30, 35 yards from goal, you kind of don't need somebody sitting that deep to deal with a long ball over the top.
That space is covered, right?
Yep.
Okay, to the second part of Rich's question, do they use it in the guise of the two centre-backs? The answer is no, but what they will do is almost sort of either get assigned roles or take turns, right? So I remember... to speak of the take turns thing first, if you have a back four, you have two centre-backs, and say, especially in the modern game, there's like maybe one striker, you'll essentially pass the striker back and forth, right? If, I'm trying to think of a striker, say it's Lewandowski for Bayern Munich, and he's up against Varane and Sergio Ramos. I would guarantee that Lewandowski will essentially, if he drifts to his left, Varane picks him up, he drifts the other way. At some point, there's a moment when Varane just nods to Ramos or whatever, and then Ramos picks him up, and you sort of take it in turns going back and forth, because you want to keep your defensive shape, but not have one person follow the striker around so he can pull you out of shape. You just communicate, pass him along.
Yep. And to your point with the single striker, that's yet another reason why you wouldn't want the sweeper-stopper combination, is because now you've got one guy doing nothing.
And you sacrifice the numerical advantage elsewhere, right?
There you go.
The other thing is there are partnerships where you could sort of call it a modern version of a sweeper-stopper. A couple of years ago, I remember Koscielny Mertesacker, and it's not the way around you think it is. It would always be Koscielny would go and attack the ball and be very good at it, and Mertesacker would be kind of free to sort of pick up loose balls and take the ball afterwards. But he wouldn't drop deep like a sweeper. He would just be the sort of freer guy. Like a limited libero type role.
Would you say that like, maybe I'm giving way too much credit way too far back, but do you think that's a product of like total football and the idea that it's not just you have one center back who can hoof it long and maybe you have one who can sort of play with the ball at their feet, that in the modern game everybody is expected to have a very good touch and the ability to pass the ball into difficult spaces?
Yeah, because even another thing I read about was the Franco Baresi, right? So people would talk about him as a sweeper for Milan in the late 80s, early 90s. But again, if you watch that Milan team, they were the opposite of a sweeper. They were the Catenaccio killers, because they played a high line and a flat back four. Because Baresi was good with the ball at his feet, he was called a sweeper because he had the characteristics of a sweeper. And now more players are expected to have that Baresi type ability to play the ball out of the back.
It's almost like things are fluid and terms take on different meanings as time passes.
Yes, and if your high school coach is playing stopper sweeper, maybe certainly suggest to him that the game has moved on.
Man, I cannot. We definitely did briefly do that in high school, and I can't remember why. Yeah,
we never did. We had a flat back four, but we had one guy who was sort of bigger and stronger, and one guy who was actually very good. He was with the academy for like Aston Villa and Coventry for a bit, who didn't sit deep and sweep, but he was the better player with the ball at his feet.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah?
I think we might have done a 3-3-1-3 formation, which is a little strange.
That is very strange.
Yes. Which we came up with, mind you.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because your high school soccer coach was the football coach,
We
right?
did for 1 year. We had a different coach every single year that I played
I see.
high school soccer. Yes. So I think it was the seniors came up with our tactics, mostly from skipping 8th period to play FIFA.
Was the Palermo president in charge of your high school?
Yes.
They change coaches a lot.
Yeah. No, I'm saying it really was.
Oh, there you were.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I did not know
Briefly,
that.
yeah. Briefly the director of Maggie Walker, yes.
Any more questions, Taylor?
I think that's it, other than how you doing, Daryl?
I'm good. I'm good.
Did you enjoy Avengers?
I did enjoy Avengers. I was scared to mention it in case we accidentally give any spoilers.
Yep.
Although there was a line from Avengers in today's show that we will not share.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you believe that Thanos was dead the whole time? And that Haley Joel Osment played Thanos as well? It's weird. You never saw that coming.
Donnie Wahlberg killed him. All right. Thank you to everybody who asked questions that we answered today. If you would like to ask us a question, we love it. It's totalsoccershow.com/questions. Plural. Totalsoccershow.com/questions is where you ask us a question. If you subscribe to the show and support the show, $5 a month gets you in the Scouting Network. $10 a month, we guarantee to answer one question per month, provided it's, within reason.
There we go.
Yeah. It's not list your top 1,000 players of all time. We're not answering that.
We are not.
We'll send you your money back before we answer that.
We definitely will. Maybe 5 players might be too much. Remember that time when we did our first pilot show and we thought we could do that as a 5-minute segment?
Yes.
We each list our 5 favorite players. That was an interesting lesson in timing.
We were cute and naive.
We sure were.
Shall we move on to the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network?
We were naive because we were young. And speaking of youngsters, yes, we've got many reports to get to, starting with Michael Curry scouting Haji Wright. I'm going to keep talking before you criticize my segue. 20-year-old American forward on loan at Sandhausen from Schalke. Once again, that's Haji Wright. Haji has not made the matchday squad for 4 weeks, which is partly explained by a hamstring issue, but it does seem like he has lost his place at Sandhausen, will be sent back to Schalke at the end of the season, and will likely be loaned again next year.
Okay, so the Haji Wright train has taken a bit of a detour.
That is a good way of putting it.
Well,
yes.
It's not, is it? Because trains don't take detours, but it's been delayed.
If something has gone horribly wrong, then they do.
Anurag Anjaria is scouting Andrea Novakovic, the 21-year-old American forward on loan at Telstar from Reading. Anurag says, thumbs down to Novakovic and Telstar for losing 1-0 in their final league game of the season. Thumbs up to their 6th place finish, which means they qualify for the playoffs for promotion to the Eredivisie.
Hooray, playoffs. Ties and no playoffs. Why do you even do this? Colin Marshall scouting Conrad De La Fuente, 16-year-old American forward for Barcelona.
Remember the name, Conrad De La Fuente.
Conrad with a K has been promoted to Juvenile A and has...
Juvenile.
Juvenile. He's one of the 504 boys. That means nothing to you, but somebody out there will appreciate that. Juvenile A has been subbed in for the final 20 minutes of the last 2 games for them.
All right, go on, Conrad.
Yeah.
Ed Ritter is scouting Ben Mines, the 17-year-old American attacker for the New York Red Bulls. Ben went the full 90 and picked up a yellow card. I knew that number was coming. In New York Red Bull 2's dire, all caps, 0-0 draw at the Ottawa Fury. Perhaps all the players were drowsy because of the bizarre 10:30 a.m. game time. It was Ottawa's annual camp day.
No idea. I'm assuming that must mean like they have a summer camp that kids go to, so then they play at 10:30 in the morning. I don't really understand, but poorly thought out, Ottawa.
I'm glad that BM90 got 90.
Okay. I'm glad you worked that one out. Todd Brannon scouting Cameron Carter-Vickers, the 21-year-old. Ooh, that got a gasp?
I've realised we haven't heard about him for a while.
We haven't.
Yeah.
21-year-old American defender on loan at Ipswich Town from Tottenham. CCV sustained an ankle injury in practice last week and was not in the squad over the weekend for Ipswich's 4-0 win over Reading, but he could return for their final match of the season against Middlesbrough.
Colin Bish is scouting Eric Williamson, the 20-year-old American midfielder for the Portland Timbers. Eric was man of the match in T2's 2-0 victory over the Sacramento Republic, putting in a solid performance on both offense and defense. Took up good positioning on defense and helped cut out passing lanes. On the offensive side, he set up several dangerous chances and eventually assisted on the second goal with a great corner kick.
Well done, Eric. Keith Kalmbach scouting Marcelo Palomino, the 16-year-old American midfielder for the Houston Dynamo. That's Marcelo Palomino. Marcelo continues to practice with the first team, but it remains to be seen if a first-team contract will be offered this season.
Russell Findlay is scouting Eric Palmer-Brown, a.k.a. EPB, the 21-year-old American defender on loan at KV Kortrijk from Manchester City. I keep forgetting he's with Manchester City. He's on loan at Kortrijk. EPB started 3 of the 4 last games for Kortrijk, going 90 in each. In the games EPB started, Kortrijk gave up 2 goals, winning all 3 games. In the game he did not start, they lost 3-0. And in this case, correlation does imply causation.
Speaking of Americans in Man City, remember Makes This Screwed?
Yeah.
Remember that guy?
Yeah.
That was a thing. Brian Hoysa scouting Serginho Dest, the 17-year-old American right back for the Ajax U19s. Serginho started at right back in the Ajax U19s 3-0 victory over AZ Alkmaar's U19s.
So what age group is this?
I believe it was the U19s, but it might have been the U19s. He outmuscled an opponent before beating the next one with a step over en route to getting a firm shot on goal that the keeper shoved up and over.
Andrew Baird. I just realised that means saved, right?
Yeah.
Andrew Baird scouting Josh Perez, the 20-year-old American winger on loan at Livorno from Fiorentina. Andrew says Livorno are going up. With a win this past weekend, the club secured promotion to Serie B for the 2018-19 season. Though his minutes were somewhat limited this season, Perez did have a clearly defined role with the club as one of the go-to subs for manager Andrea Sottil. Perez's loan expires on June 30th, at which point he'll head back to Fiorentina. However, with Livorno moving up to Serie B and Perez unlikely to crack the Fiorentina first team next year, another loan would seem likely to make sense for all involved.
Mark Jones scouting Rhian Brewster, 18-year-old English striker for Liverpool. Brewster, who is still recovering from an injury sustained in January, is rumored to be sent out on loan next season by Liverpool. It seems Celtic are the leading contenders, though there have been suggestions that Steven Gerrard might take Brewster with him to Rangers. That feels like a media construction, in my opinion.
I don't know. I could see a lot of Rangers, Liverpool players going on loan to Rangers and strengthening the team. Not sure about Rhian Brewster because he's so young and inexperienced, but Gerrard did work with the youth team.
But do we know that Gerrard is going to Rangers, or is that still a thing that's rumored?
It's still rumoured, but if it does happen, then...
But just, couldn't you see an editor being like, Gerrard, Rangers, this Liverpool kid is loaned with Celtic, let's make this some drama.
Like a very lame version of one of those charts in The Wire.
Yes.
The pinboard and the strings.
Exactly.
They have a lame version of that at the Daily Mail.
I think Presbeluski is doing that reporting for the Daily Mail, yes.
Steve Renard is scouting Yuri Tielemans, the 20-year-old Belgian midfielder from Monaco. Monsieur Tielemans did not play at all, so I cannot provide an entertaining report this week. I'm glad you enjoyed last week's, though. Steve concludes, please do not feel you must read any of this on the air.
I left that in. Mazakine Wagner scouting Andre Onana.
You're going to encourage people to be sending in non-reports now.
Yeah, don't do that. Andre Onana, the 22-year-old Cameroonian goalkeeper at Ajax, scouted by Mazakine Wagner. Or Wagner. Probably Wagner. Onana kept a clean sheet against third-place AZ Alkmaar in Ajax's 3-0 final home victory. This is his 19th clean sheet in all competitions this season. With the title very much decided, the Dutch tabloids have amused themselves writing clickbait headlines about Onana's imminent move to the usual English clubs.
So the Dutch tabloids have their own... pinboard.
Yeah,
they put their terrible rumours on. John Youngblood is scouting Rio Griffiths, the 17-year-old English striker for Tottenham. Rio retweeted different reports of former head of recruitment Paul Mitchell wanting to sign him for Red Bull Leipzig and posted Instagram stories of images from the 9-0 drubbing of Arsenal's U18s. ESPN FC have now reported that Tottenham are looking to open negotiations with Rio Griffiths for his first professional contract. Also, Daryl, his Twitter and Instagram have the name Rio Valdo next to Rio in case you'd prefer to call him that.
I think that's in reference to you not wanting to call any Englishman Rio aside from the one true Rio.
I'm going to call him Mr. Griffiths.
Okay.
Young Mr. Griffiths.
That works. Well, thank you to John, Mazakine, Steve, Mark, Andrew, Brian, Russell, Keith, Colin, Todd, Ed, Colin, Anurag, and Michael.
You went reverse chronological.
I sure did.
I like it. I like it. Thank you to everybody who sent in scouting reports. Once again, the URL to join the Scouting Network and support the show is totalsoccershow.com/join.
That is accurate.
The URL to submit questions is totalsoccershow.com/questions.
That is also accurate.
It's Thursday today.
You got it.
It's Thursday today. There will be no show.
That kind of week.
No show tomorrow because there are a lot of bonus shows this week.
Yeah.
Right? The Grant Weil interview, the Rory Smith interview. If you haven't heard them, please go back and listen. We also have a new episode of the Top Draw Soccer Show where Travis speaks to the president of USL PDL.
I think it's like co-director.
Co-director, a very important person at USL PDL, Chris Madden. So please go listen to the Top Draw Soccer Show as well. Until then, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to watch Avengers: Infinity War and then talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
And thanks for not talking to me during the movie.
No problem.
It's one of my pet hates. Listeners, thank you for listening and we'll talk to you again next week.